The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, we got our friend of the podcast, Joe McIntyre, who is now in a new role over at Slotted, which was recently launched. He is the general manager over there. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Slotted is, and they're helping you with your 3PL RFPs, but we're going to talk a little bit about why. Why are they helping you with your 3PL RFPs, and what are some of the issues around 3PL RFPs? What are some of the challenges from both the 3PL, the brand side, and how to navigate those and bring those together? And then we'll talk about the tool that they've put together with Slotted and how that can be utilized in that process. So, Joe, my friend, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for considering me a friend of the show. I've been listening for a while, and I love what it is that you bring to the industry. A lot of people you don't know about that you hear about, learn about. Great people out there doing fun stuff, but usually behind the scenes. So always fun to listen to the podcast when it comes out.
Definitely appreciate that, and we're always trying to bring those behind the scenes people to the stage. We'll say there in that sense. So great to have you back on and doing some new things now, some interesting things, which we're going to talk about. But we wanted to focus the conversation here as we're in the beginning of the year, the beginning of 2025. Here, people are coming out of the fog or the craziness of peak season, holidays. When you're in the logistics world, that's typically the craziest time of the year, right? And people start to think about how are they going to handle that for the next year, right? When they get into January and things like that. And one of those things, typically, if you had maybe a bad experience during those times, right, is looking for a new 3PL or fulfillment partner to help you out from an e-commerce perspective, or maybe a B2B perspective too as well. But that involves the RFP process, right? So why don't you kind of start us off here for, people that maybe aren't familiar or, have heard kind of these terms before, but not quite sure how they work. What is that RFP process when it comes to a 3PL or fulfillment partner? What is it all about?
Yeah, I wish there was an easy way to just package it and say an RFP process is this, but I think most of us who work in the logistics and the warehousing space understand that every single company, every single brand, every single provider approaches it a little bit differently. So high level RFP process is the request for proposal. So I'm a brand, I'm a shipper, I'm whoever I may be that needs warehousing, fulfillment, distribution. And I say, I know what my business looks like. I would like a couple different people to bid on that business, to say, hey, based on our shipping profiles, this is how we could service your business. This is what our costs would look like. And this is what we would do to win your business, service your business effectively, and ultimately help your company grow. What that looks like in practice is different for a lot of people. Sometimes it's a random cold email that just goes, I found you on the internet, give me your rates. Not super effective in my opinion, but we'll get to that as the conversation goes on. Sometimes it's a 50 plus page overview of the company, all the nuances, all the requirements that they have, that the fulfillment provider then needs to take a look at and understand if they can effectively service or not, and how they want to price that. And then you have everything in between. You have people that use lead generation services to find it. You have people that use brokers, people that just work off referrals. You have people that talk to one company, you have people that talk to 100 companies. And it can get messy for both sides of the equation if the right conversations aren't had and the right level of experience and expertise aren't had. At least that's how it's been historically. And so we hope with what we're bringing to the market now, we can change that a little bit, make people feel a little bit more confident in what they're doing, and level the playing field on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting there, the vast difference in people's approach, right, to going to do this RFP, right, where you said like, somebody just simply send like a one sentence email and says, send me your rates, right, in a sense. And then somebody's doing like a 50-page, requirements document and all these different things. So I guess that, it kind of raises the question on, this RFP process. I mean, what do you see? Because I think you're in a unique spot too, right? I mean, from your experience, I mean, obviously now you're specifically through this role with Slotted, you're focused on the RFP side of things, but you've both been on the brand side, both been on the provider side, both through previous roles and consulting as well. So what have you seen, and what are some of the challenges around this process? I mean, why do we have like kind of this vast difference in the way people approach it, and why is it not like this kind of just black and white thing?
It's a deeper, more philosophical answer. I don't think that will ever change, that there's going to be a
Yeah.
different level of sophistication and a different level of approach from different companies, because a lot of it depends on a few factors. One is going to be, where is that company in their life cycle, right? A startup is going to have way different needs, going to prioritize different factors, and going to have a different level of expertise more often than not than somebody who's been around in business for 25 plus years, that has battle scarred what their business looks like and knows what they need to ask, right? So I don't necessarily know if there's a good reason why it's like that, and I don't know if we'll solve that problem specifically.
Yeah.
But the thing that can get solved is experience solves a lot, right?
Mm.
So if you've been through an RFP process before, if you even haven't been through one, if you've been someone who's just sent the one line email that says,
Yeah.
send me your rates,
Mhm.
well, you probably know how that ended up for you,
Mhm.
because you probably then just looked at the 55 emails you got back with rates. Half of them hopefully said, sorry, we don't just send out rates. We
Mhm.
like to have a conversation, understand the business more so we can price it effectively. But there's probably going to be people on the flip side that just send rates back. And
Mhm.
again, that's not good or bad. That just shows the level of experience and sophistication, or what's prioritized by that fulfillment provider coming back. Now, with that, really bad experiences can occur,
Yeah.
but you really only learn through experience, right? So I mentioned, someone may have a 50-page proposal of all those requirements. The reason they probably have that is because over time they had a page of zero requirements and then realized, oof, we should have figured that out. That's a conversation we
Yeah.
should have talked about. We should have asked that question. And they build, and eventually they're running an effective proposal. So the flip side of that coin is, well, how can you help get the smaller end, the more new businesses, infant businesses, businesses who have really high potential people but not
Mhm.
necessarily highly experienced people? How do you get them accelerated and bring tools and structure and approach to them where they can make confident decisions? And some of that is a little bit of tough love.
Mhm.
Some of that's creating friction in the process, but it's really both sides of the relationship working together, right? 3PL is willing to say, hey, I don't just take on any business.
Yeah.
These are the kind of questions I need to know. If you can't answer them, that's fine. I'm happy to refer you to somebody else. But right now we're not gonna pursue this opportunity. And then from there, the brand understands, ooh, I should have thought about that. Okay, I get this. And then they go to the next call, the next conversation a little bit more effective. And no one solved it yet because it's a hard problem to solve, right? And I
Yeah.
don't know if it'll ever get solved, but you can definitely close the gap, and that's what we're working to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is very interesting because there are, like you said, a lot of different experience levels too. And I think, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but a lot of these brands too, right? Especially like on the e-commerce side, and they're not typically always coming from like a supply chain or a logistics background in a sense, right? So it's kind of like all new to them when they're going to go, do this type of thing and try and navigate that. And, I've talked to some brands on the podcast too, and, about how they've kind of, built out this and understanding over time. And, it may be mistakes on both sides, right? It may be, like you said, I went to this and, came to them with like zero requirements basically written down. And then, after a month or so, I'm like, oh, I should have told them this, or I should have told them that, right? And now all of a sudden you get that 50-page like requirements list. So as these brands, and I think too, as we see e-commerce kind of continue to expand, right? We see more interesting products certainly coming for consumers to purchase and get out there, but that also sometimes brings, more complex requirements in a sense, right? So tell us a little bit about, not only from, I guess, the brand side, but also the 3PL side too. I mean, as these requirements get more complex and, you start to get these 50-page documents, like you said, I mean, how do you navigate those? Like, how do you set that up as the brand? And then as the 3PL, like, how do you digest that and take that in as well?
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Do you want more warehouse content delivered to your inbox? Sign up for our new email series called Warehouse Wisdom Wednesday to get an educational series of emails on warehouse basics delivered directly to you every Wednesday morning. Find the sign up link in the show notes.
Yeah, let's start it from the brand side. So
Sure.
if we think about how the business has evolved over time, there are a few ways that brands can go into their RFP now, or into searching for somebody, right? And whether it's simple or complex, these hold true, right? You can do it by yourself, and there's one or two ways it branches off from there. I don't know what I'm doing, but want to, need to, for whatever reason, believe I can do it myself, and I'm going to go out there and just trial by fire.
Mm.
Or I'm experienced. I want to be in control of what's going on. I know what questions to ask because I've done this before, and therefore I'm going to go out and run this RFP on my own. I'm going to build out my prospectus. I'm going to build out, I know my business. I know what information they generally need. So I feel confident in doing that. The caveat there is, and I have a team and time and attention to be able to do that also, which typically is what you'll see at the enterprise level. Teams that are only focused on those partnerships, and part of their role is every couple of years they go and bid out their business, right? But when we think about the meatier part of the bell curve of shippers out there, not just even e-commerce, B2B, anyone who is moving and warehousing product, as you move away from the head of the bell curve where those enterprise companies are, you start to have teams that are asked to do more with less, because the first people often to go, whether right or wrong, when money gets tight, is
Yeah.
the ops team, and everyone needs to do a little more. And so maybe you do have the expertise, but you don't have the bandwidth. You don't have the team to be able to do that, and because you're wearing so many hats, right?
Mm.
Whereas you move further and further to the tail, you get to teams that are startups and don't have the experience, don't have the time, don't know what to do. So you can either go about it by yourself because you have to. You go about it by yourself because you want to and you're afforded the luxury. You can say, hey, I'm going to work with a consultant that's out there. And there's tons of phenomenal consultants that focus solely on the RFP process. And there can be challenges and downsides to that. You're at the mercy of what their network is, right? Their ability to either find people within their network or expand their network for your needs. But there's a level of uncertainty that can come with that of, am I seeing the people they're putting in front of me because they're the right people for me? Because they're the people that this person has the best relationship with,
Mm.
has the best revenue share with, even though I'm also paying them? I
Yeah.
don't really know. And that's not to say that everyone works that way, but it allows for a brand to start to ask that question and start to have that concern. And it may not be there right away, but you better believe it's starting to creep in the first time that
Yeah.
the service level drops, right? Or the first time there's a mistake. Hey, why am I really with this person? And then you also have just a more traditional route of, there's brokers, there's 3PL aggregators that are out there that are just doing lead gen, lead search, making connections, doing traditional matchmaking. And there's services out there that have leveraged AI and different technology to do the same thing. But like we talked about at the beginning of this
Mm.
long-winded answer, every brand is different, and
Yeah.
everyone in a different part of their life cycle, and everyone prioritizes different things. You and I might sell the exact same widget, and we may sell it for the exact same price on the exact same channels, but depending on how we've set up the economic structure of our company and what we're prioritizing, profit over cash flow over revenue over whatever we're trying to optimize for,
Yeah.
we may have very different requirements for what it needs. I may be set up in a way, and I've built in margin elsewhere, and I know I want a really high touch experience because I have a 5-year plan to grow in a certain way, and I don't want to move providers after this. And you may be set up in a way in which, hey, I don't really care. I just need the lowest fulfillment cost right now because I am pumping volume for a different reason, right? And that neither is right or wrong. They're just different. But, if you type into an algorithm or if you aren't working with someone who is really tight into understanding your business, some of that can get just lost in between the lines or in between the answers you give, and we both get given back the same people we should probably talk to.
Yeah.
And that may not necessarily be the best positive outcome for either side of the fulfillment
Mm.
provider or the brand. So you asked about the complexity of it. I think on the brand side, those are the ways that you can go about it. You either do it yourself because you know how to, or because you think you can.
Yeah.
You use a consultant, or you go somewhere in the middle where it's, hey, there's not really a ton of consulting, but get me in touch with the people you think I should talk to. So one's do it alone, one's someone do it for me, one's a hybrid. But you can lose control that way, and
Mm.
you can lose impartiality that way also, which isn't good or bad. It's just the risk that you take on when you use one of those routes. And then the flip side for fulfillment providers is, if you're doing it yourself and you're not really experienced,
Yeah.
well, now there's a whole lot of work and a lot more attention, a lot more risk, a lot more uncertainty that you need to take in to do that proposal effectively. And so now you're probably spending more time on it than you would for the size of the deal. You're usually pulling information versus getting information pushed to you,
Mm.
and you're essentially starting to do the RFP for them, right?
Yeah.
And I say that because I was at a company that was very early in their life cycle. And although I knew better, that's what was happening with us, right?
Mm.
Because it was just a matter of, I didn't have access to the information. I couldn't get everything that they needed. And I knew what they needed, but I couldn't always come across it. But there are also things that I didn't know that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky to have some people shepherd me and guide me because they saw the potential upside in working with us. But I had other people said, hey, you guys aren't you're just not really where we need you to be yet. We
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to service you effectively, and moved us on. And then on the fulfillment provider side too, you get to the other end and you got 50 pages
Mm.
of what's happening. You have a lot of questions. That's great. But who do you talk to? Are you talking with the brand themselves? Are you talking with the consultant representing the brands? Are you working through a middleman, a matchmaker? Again, not right or wrong, not good or bad. It's just, does every we all know how the game of telephone goes. Does everything get
Yeah.
through effectively both ways? And is the relationship good and the deal moving smoothly and everything going forward because the middle person is really effective, but they're going to step away once the deal happens, or not, right?
Mm.
So again, some uncertainty that can happen there. And so I think those are the two things that are super complex. I would be remiss if I didn't say fulfillment providers would 9 times out of 10 prefer a 50-page
Yeah.
RFP that has every piece of information that they possibly could ever need versus a one-line email,
Yeah.
because it allows them to price more confidently and more effectively. It does take a lot more time. And that's where the downside can be for fulfillment providers is, working directly with the brands, working with matchmakers. You put a bid out, you may never hear back.
Yeah.
And so you don't know if you just put tons of hours in and you were so far off the mark. You don't know if you just miss it. You don't know if it was a coin toss. You don't have any feedback, right? And that's not an effective use of your time. It's not a way for you to become more competitive or advantageous in the marketplace. And so that's a big challenge with how things are going about now, right?
Yeah.
As we bring in more automation, as we bring in more AI, as we bring in people who are moving at a faster clip with leaner teams, the follow-up piece isn't always the top priority.
Yeah.
And that can be challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's very interesting, everything you said there. And I think there's a couple challenges and maybe you could call them like pain points in there too, that you kind of just mentioned. I mean, one is certainly, like you said, I like how you said, like, well, I don't know what I don't know. Right. And some of these younger brands, maybe they're seeing a lot of growth, right? But they don't necessarily know, like, what do they need to put in this? And then, you have fulfillment providers that are then saying to them, well, you're not where you need to be. And I remember specifically as we're talking about that, like when I interviewed Jeff Caden from Capacity, I asked him, I'm like, what would you say to brands like that are looking for a 3PL? And he said, like, have good data. Like, if your data is not good, like, I'm not going to work with you. Right. And I think too, like some brands would be like, oh, how could they like say, no, I'm not going to work with you. Right. But the reality is, like, they need to be successful. And if they don't have the information to do that, then they can't do that. And I think, the other challenge there that you kind of mentioned too is, how do you know that, you're getting to the right providers potentially, right? Because you're either using a consultant maybe, and maybe the consultant, hopefully doesn't have, bias, but in some cases there could be some bias, or they're limited in their network, like you said, or, you're going to Google and, whatever's coming up first is like who you're contacting, right? Like,
Whoever
just like
whoever's got the deepest SEO pockets, right?
yeah, definitely, definitely. Because it's just like, pizza near me, 3PL near me. Okay. Like, sure. So,
Right.
I think that, there's a lot of challenges there and pain points that, have been going on for a long time. Right. And I think what you guys are trying to do, and I'll let you tell us about how you're trying to do this, but with Slotted, you're trying to address a lot of these pain points, and I think it's a very different approach that you're doing. So I guess tell us a little bit about what is Slotted, and tell us how is it addressing some of these pain points.
In one line, Slotted is a true marketplace for fulfillment, where our goal is to maintain neutrality, right?
Mm,
So when we talk about that biasy perspective, or we talk about searching the internet, those are two things we tried to address right away. It is a free for fulfillment providers. It is free to join. It is free to create your account. It is free to have your profile up there. You are in control of every piece of that profile, what's on there about your company, how you want it to look. We don't crawl. We don't do anything to pull that. That's you,
mm.
right? And then from a brand perspective, by design, you better be ready to do the legwork, because the only thing that we're giving for you is the open database of fulfillment providers that are out there. Again, we're not curating who can or can't be on. So addressing that challenge of the size of a network, right?
Mm.
If you have a warehouse, you fulfillment provider, you want to see it, you can list yourself on there, right? If you're a brand and you're going out, we have a ton of search functionality that's in there, from as broad as geography, or as narrow within geography as down to the zip code, to 30 plus filters there. You can filter on what routing guides do they support, do they do B2B? What EDI providers are they already connected with? What kind of vast services do they do? If you think of it, it is likely a search functionality there.
Mm.
And so, again, we don't have any kind of hand in that. If you say you want a warehouse that does apparel and can do returns and integrates with NetSuite and runs Ship Heroes WMS and can do print on demand and also has frozen, well, if there's one of those that have signed up and are part of the Slotted network, that
Yeah.
specific thing is going to come back, and only that's going to come back.
Mm.
To your point before, if you went and you type that into Google, who knows what's going to come back? Whoever
Right.
bid the highest on the word fulfillment, and although you had 50 other words in there, that's who's coming back on it, right?
Mm.
And that may be the right selection for you, but how do you actually know that as the brand or not, right? And then from there, it's the brand doing their own research and contacting those fulfillment providers that came back, right? If I think about, recently my wife and I were looking at new houses, right?
Mm.
I like a house that is not a fixer upper and is a mid-century modern type feel.
Yeah.
My wife would love something that's turnkey and very modern, but
Mm.
feels homey,
Yeah.
right? Well, both of us are going to open up Zillow or Redfin or whatever home finding app you want to open, and we're
Mm.
going to say, we both know we need 4 bedrooms plus. We both know that we would like a garage. We both know that we would like at least 2.5 baths. And
Mm.
we're going to put those in and we're going to get everything back. But the ones I bring to her on my list are going to look a little different than the ones that she brings on her list, even though we had the same quantitative requirements of like, it must have this general structure. There's things that are going to speak differently to what I care about or what I prioritize versus what she cares about and what she prioritizes. Your fulfillment search is no different than that. And so we looked at that and went about it that way. Let's show you exactly who you want to work with
Mm.
based on what you say. And so there is total neutrality for us
Yeah.
from the search functionality, right? Now, the cool piece that we have in there also, which comes back to the questions you were asking before, is
Mm.
we have a self-guided RFP tool. So as the brand does their search and they say, I have that crazy requirement where they need to do print on demand, but also have frozen capacity and whatever ridiculous thing I may be doing,
Yeah.
right? I now have found, let's say, 50 people across the world, because I don't care where it's at. I just need them to have these requirements, right? So geography wasn't part of my search, let's say. I see those 50 people, I'm looking at their profiles, I'm messaging with them, I'm
Mm.
interacting with them, I'm seeing what's going on, and I'm going, all right, cool. I have a good sense of these are the people that I want to bring. I have the ability to add them then to my long list. And when I add them to my long list, this is now where we support the fulfillment providers without getting inundated with tons and tons of leads that may be their ICP, may not be their ICP. This is where we help them accelerate from the top of the funnel to really high intent choices.
Mm.
So we limit your long list at 25, and we say, okay, of everyone that came back for your search functionality or for multiple different searches you did, who are the 25 people you want to check if they're open to doing business with you too?
Mm.
And then you are able to send them the RFI. What that does is that pings against what the fulfillment provider set up, right? Maybe a fulfillment provider wants to work with someone who has really low SKU counts, really high volumes, right? Has to be at least 10,000 orders a month.
Mm.
Well, my crazy frozen printed whatever doesn't do that. So I'm not going to be able to bring that fulfillment provider into my RFP because they said that they don't want to see leads like that. And so their team doesn't have fielding an email, responding to say yes or no. They've already opted out of a brand that meets my profile that I'm looking at, right? Let's say we narrow that list down from the 25 max to now there's 15 that are eligible, right? They're people that are actively looking for business. My business matches what they're actively looking for. They're open to being invited to an RFP from us. Now I move to the short list and I can only bring a max of 8, right?
Mm.
There's no minimum, but we're not letting people bring more than 8 because we know from our experiences as consultants, right? Our experiences as people that are fulfillment providers, it's complex to respond. As a brand, it's complex to do the analysis. The more information you have isn't always better. So we found the sweet spot to be somewhere between 6 to 8 to really get a good understanding and swath of what's out there without being highly inundated with analysis and what's going on. And so we maxed it at that. And so from there, you're able to open up your RFP, and that's where you send out that 1 line or 50-page proposal of what's going on. But we've brought some structure to that for the brands so that we can say, hey, of what your business is about, why you're going to bid, questions for them. Hey, why are you leaving where you're currently at? Or why are you looking for a new person to go to, so that brands understand that? What are the pain points that you've had previously? What are some nuances about your business? What does your profile look like? What is your shipment history? What channels are you in? Are you going to new channels? Do you expect growth? Do you expect contraction? What does your returns look like? How big of a percent is that? Because again, we want those fulfillment providers to understand and see all that. We want to be a forcing mechanism for the people who would generally send 1-line emails to understand there is value and you must put in a lot of this information, but also protect against going too crazy because at some point there's diminishing returns on how large your proposal is, right? So we don't cap anything that you can put in, but it does bring some guidance and some structure to what the brand is doing from their perspective to do that, right?
Mm.
And then they're able to outline everything that they want. Hey, when are we expecting your proposal back? When should you expect us to give you responses about first cuts or second cuts? Or are we just going right to a final decision? Are we going to visit people in person or are we going to visit people virtually, right? Again, another friction point and another nudge of this is an important relationship you're about to get into. Don't just wing it, right?
Mm.
Are you visiting or are you doing a virtual tour? There's no option for I'm not touring, right?
Yeah.
We want that to be a point on how we're doing it. We want that to be front of mind for them, right?
Mm.
This is definitely designed for someone who wants to have a level of control, a level of visibility, a level of involvement beyond I need a new warehouse, right? They need to be, they are going to be involved. And at that point in time, they're also high intent with what they're doing because the people that they're speaking with in this RFP, they chose. Again, Slotted didn't choose it. They did all we did was narrow down their search to our whole network of fulfillment providers that all opted in themselves based on the requirements that they gave, right? And then to flip it around from the fulfillment provider side, we have the ability for them to, we know that one of the pain points that we've heard is, I have to restart my RFP every single time. Well, we have the ability for you to load your base rates. Nobody sees those. Nobody sees your parcel rate cards. Nobody sees your pick, pack, storage, any of that, but it's preloaded there. And you're able to say, hey, my default markup is whatever. And then you can go and do your whole sales cycle yourself. Because again, from a Slotted perspective, we're not trying to replace your sales cycle. That's what makes you different. No one knows your business better than you do. No one knows how to close your business better than you do. But how do we help amplify that for you? So they have the ability to build out your RFP from scratch every single time, but we have stuff that's document libraries for you so that you can have stuff ready to go, right? You bring it in, you can rebuild out your parcel rate cards every single time you want to, so that you can be as specific and as targeted towards that opportunity as you want. Again, it's not necessarily accelerating or removing the people from the sales process. It's helping facilitate it to be more efficient. And because we are able to do that, now when your proposals come back, you can stand out differently and you can stand out more effectively for a brand, and you don't have to worry that the brand may not be sophisticated enough to the analysis, right? So let's say you have a warehouse and your storage is based off of pallet locations for the month, whatever it may be, just at the end of the month you count it. Mine may be based off of cubic feet used, right? Well, I'm pricing off cubic feet, you're pricing off pallets. That comes back. How does the brand actually know what their total cost is going to be, right? That's going to be difficult for them to analyze. Maybe they have the ability to do it, maybe they don't. Maybe they just get frustrated and they go, you know what, I don't really care. Storage is negligible, whether that's true or not for them. They'll just say that. And then they go, you have the lowest pick rate, so I'm picking you. Well, with Slotted, because we're bringing in the information from the brand and we're bringing in product level information and shipment level information, when I price it based off square footage, we know based on what the brand is saying we expect our storage to be, and we expect our inbounds to be. We can not do anything black magic. It's just math. We're doing the math to say that would translate to this much cubic feet based on our best understanding from information the brand provided and rates the fulfillment provider provided, right? And then on the flip side, they can do the same thing with pallets. Well, you know how many pallets are coming in and out because that's a question that we asked and we know what's going to be on there. So you can do that. So now it's looking at it and saying, hey, provider one, this is what inbound is. This is what storage is. This is what pick and pack is. This is what outbound is. This is what minimum is, whatever. This is what you should expect to pay in January, in February, in March, in April, in May. And then you'll see it for A, B, C, D, E, up to the 8 providers you bring in. And you can say, oh, Kevin's warehouse, so expensive on pick and pack, but he's got phenomenal parcel rates. And so when I actually look at it, for me, it'd be way cheaper to go with Kevin's warehouse than Joe's warehouse, because Kevin's warehouse totally, because I'm able to see it in a digestible manner, looks like this. And mine looks like this. And yes, now I can with confidence go back to my CFO and say, yeah, be ready. Our warehousing pick and pack line in our P&L is going to go up, but our total spend for warehousing and fulfillment is going to go down. Here's the information. This is why I chose the way I chose, right? And so it helps with that internal conversation as well from the brand side. Now, from the fulfillment provider side, now getting a proposal from Slotted in the same format every single time. Right? So you don't have to rebuild the wheel every single time. You know what to expect. You know what's there. You know what that looks like. You're able to then go and do your sales cycle the way that you would typically do it, right? And you don't need to work through us. You don't need to do any of those things. You don't need to mark up for in perpetuity rev share potentially, right? You would just do it the same way you would if this lead had came into your inbox cold, right? Or came in through your email or whatever other search functionality you did. And then we allow them to have that flexibility and have that ease for their team. And then the really cool part is you don't get ghosted. So the way that we're set up is that we have we have a skin in the game for the brands. We purposely put in friction for the brands on the front, right? Because we want people with high intent again, right? We don't want people that are looking to just say, hey, I just need warehousing, tell me who to go with. More than happy to refer them to other people for that, right? But for us, we want people who are in and involved, and because of that, they have to make a deposit as a brand when they open their RFP. So there's no cost for them to be on, there's no cost for them to search, but when they're ready to do their RFP, they have to put a deposit down, and that deposit's refundable to them, but upon them abiding by our guidelines. Don't waste time of people. Be respectful of the fulfillment providers who are taking time and energy to understand your business and put it in. Be responsive. Right? If the providers that they bring to the RFP answer yes to those questions, they're still eligible for their refund. At that point in time, then it goes to the next step, which is, as a brand, I'm going to award the business. I award the business to Kevin because Kevin had the best opportunity in front of us. Or maybe it wasn't even the most cost effective, but we knew from the conversations it was the right partner for us, right? That's definitely an outcome that should happen more times than not. The cheapest is not always the best.
True.
So, whatever it is, we select who it is. And now Joe in a traditional world would go, wonder if they've made that decision yet. Hey, following up, how are things going? Any feedback on my RFP? Silence. Run into Kevin and we're catching up. And I was like, yeah, man, I got this brand that came in. It was awesome. I'm like, cool, guess I lost that one,
Yeah.
right? But that doesn't happen now, because when the brand awards that, the next they have to answer is they have to give feedback to the providers that didn't win. And it doesn't have to be super detailed, doesn't need, but there needs to be some level. And we give some structure to them of like, hey, how could they have been more competitive in these areas, and a flow for them to go through, and it's not cumbersome for them, but they have to do it to get their refund back. If they skip it and opt out of it, they don't get their refund back, right? And then the last piece is, and we got this from feedback as we were going through beta testing, is yeah, people like award you business all the time, and then and things change, they stay with their people, they took the rates
Yeah.
back, and and they never move in. Like, okay, well, you were going through this with high intent, and yes, we understand things change, but you also need to actually move in and start doing the business. And once you move in and start doing the business, then we'll release the refund. So again, there's some friction there for providers to have high intent, operate, or not providers, brands to have high intent, operate in a way which is respectful of the time and the energy that fulfillment providers are putting in. It's a
Yeah.
lot of work to put an RFP together, right? From a fulfillment provider perspective, there's a lot on the line for them to do that, and they ultimately want to service the business well, so they're going to operate in that manner.
Yeah.
And then we want to make sure that they follow through with what they were doing. So there's some things that we've built in to help solve some of the challenges that we've been talking about to this point, and we're adapting as we get more feedback with it as well. But that's really what we wanted to do. We wanted to take out the potential misalignment of incentives on the brand side and on the fulfillment provider side. We wanted to make sure we were maintaining that neutrality, because the goal is for the people to find the right provider,
Yeah.
right? Not the providers that do SEO the best, the providers that do fulfillment the best, not the providers that, get in front of the right people with the right paper rates and then change things up. We want people that are going to be able to service the businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great that, all through that, I mean, on both sides of the table, you guys have built in this level of accountability, I think, on both sides, whether it's from the fulfillment partner side or from the brand side. There's accountability there that they're going to, do the right thing from a business sense, right? I mean, they're going to communicate, right? They're going to close the loop. And, that was one of the challenges you kind of said early in the conversation too, is like, what's the feedback? Like, did I do a good job, or was my pricing okay? Why didn't they come with me? And you're taking away that, getting ghosted, like you said there as well. And I think, having that accountability, and then also putting the structure around it, which, I think you and the team over there is certainly, taking from lots of experience of going through this on what is effective there. And, I like that you said that, well, we're only going to, maximum only going to give you 8 results, right? Because she said, based on experience and seeing these things, like, that's kind of the number where it makes sense to do that. So, I think there's a lot going into this to give it that structure and be able to be really different and be a useful tool. And I think, standardizing a lot of it too, like you mentioned there for the fulfillment provider. Well, every time I get this RFP, it's going to be in the same format, right? So it's like, well, I know exactly how I'm going to digest this. We love processes, right, on the warehouse side, so we can actually make a process of how we're gonna go about like deciphering this RFP and how we're gonna respond to it. And I think that's a great thing to be able to do, and a tool to provide as well. So now I'm curious, because I think that this is probably a question you're getting a lot, I'm sure. Probably a question a lot of people have listening to this. But, there's a lot of these, 3PL matchmaker tools, whatever you want to call them, out there, right? So what really makes Slotted different from some of the other ones that are on the market?
Yeah, I think before I give that, I want to go
Sure.
back for a second. You were talking about the structure and putting in some control, right? And you had said we give back only 8, right? At no point in time, the only time we ever give back a result, or we ever give our input, is just the factual response of, this is who I want to search for. These are the requirements of people I want to see. We say, okay, this
Okay.
is everybody we have that meet what you put in, right? We only allow you to bring 8 people maximum to your proposal, but that's all chosen by the brand. That's all driven by the brand. Now, is the brand also using a consultant through within Slotted? Possibly, I don't know. But however they're choosing who they're bringing to, we don't have a hand in that. We just have a hand in saying you can't bring more than 8 because we want to make sure that you're being guided. And I want to make sure that I clarified that, because this
Sure.
leads into how are we different, right?
Mm.
We're self-guided. And so what does that mean? That means the brand and the fulfillment providers both are in total control of what their experience looks like on that website, right? So when they come to Slotted, be ready to work on your own, right?
Yeah.
Which may not appeal to everyone,
Mhm.
and that's okay. We're designed to be a tool that anybody can use, but we're not necessarily going to be a tool that everyone may be in a position to use, right? I think we're very easy. I think very thoughtful in how we've designed it, whether you're an expert in fulfillment from a brand perspective or a novice. And I think you can go through and make a decision as long as you know your business, right? As long as you know the qualities and the characteristics about yourself as a shipper, you can effectively do that. And as a fulfillment provider, it's the same thing, right? I'm not gate brands from you, right?
Mhm.
There may be brands on there that you never know about and you never see, but that's because you've either opted out of them from the ICP you set up or because they have chosen not to look at you. Your ability to be
Mhm.
found on the website is fully related to the services that you provide, the customers that you go after, and how open or how narrow you want your ICP to be. And so when I think about what makes us different, if I'm looking from a brand perspective, like in general, both either the brand side or the fulfillment provider side, there is a level of neutrality that we maintain when it comes to the find and how people get to each other, right?
Mhm.
There is no cost to have your warehouses and your company on the platform. There is no cost for a brand to be on there to begin with. Searching is free, but we are removing the barrier of SEO. So when a brand says, I know this is what I want to see, and these are the really specific things I want to see, they're only going to get that back. So they're able to see those brands effectively, right? That's neutral. You
Mhm.
can't play for placement. You can't pay to show up in so many searches. You can't pay for coming higher. You can't pay for a sponsored space as a fulfillment provider, right?
Right.
Within the search, right? Now, if you're an ecosystem partner, different conversation, and we could talk about that at a different time, right?
Mhm.
But when it comes to the actual piece of finding a fulfillment provider, that is as neutral as we can be. Now, from the brand side, same thing. I'm not pushing anybody. Joe,
Mhm.
it's not Slotted and Joe think these are the 10 people you should talk to. It's this is what you said you wanted. Based on what our providers have said,
Mhm.
these are the 10 that match what your search criteria was, right?
Mhm.
And it may be someone that's Joe's garage, 5,000 square feet in the middle of nowhere, Idaho,
Yeah.
and ship bomb. And those two are going to
Yeah.
come back. That's not going to happen if you search it on Google,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you may actually just need the 5,000 square feet in Idaho because you had a really specific use case.
Mm.
Who knows, right? And so now you've actually found someone that you need, right? Because
Yeah.
you're a startup in Boise and you want somebody where you can go to the warehouse and you need them to pick up the phone. And like that's actually exactly what you needed. And you found them and you wouldn't have found them otherwise,
Mm.
right? So I think at a high level, that's it, right? It's the neutrality that's there. From a brand perspective, when you think about a traditional matchmaker, they sit in the middle of that deal,
Mm.
right? And so as a brand, you potentially are going to see rates that are elevated a bit because if they're sitting in the middle of the deal, likely the fulfillment provider is also going to be giving them a cut of what's going on. That's typical and standard in the fulfillment space with rev share models for leads or for connections that are happening. So since we don't sit in the middle of that, you aren't going to see that markup, right?
Mhm.
Because there is we aren't taking a percent of the revenue and we're not taking a percent of the revenue in perpetuity. There is a fee that we have for an award if a RFP or if a fulfillment provider wins the RFP, but it's highly reasonable and I'm more than happy to outline that with anybody. Go ahead and email me. I know you'll ask me for how to get in contact with me at the end.
Sure.
We can go through that. Brand also has the full access and control. So when you're working with a matchmaker, you're giving the access and the control of what's getting to you through them.
Mm.
But now you're the one that's in control because you're doing the search and you're doing the criteria and you're doing the vetting and the finding of who you want to talk to. Incentives are also aligned, right? Because we're not taking money from a fulfillment provider's perspective of lead generation or percent of revenue. Like it is in our best interest to make sure that you get matched with the right person. So
Mm.
it's in our best interest to make sure that we have the right fulfillment providers and a lot of fulfillment providers on there for you. Because if we can't curate both sides of the marketplace, one side falls off and the marketplace falls apart,
Mm.
right? So if we have brands that don't want to be on because our fulfillment providers aren't very good or they only get the same people over and over and over, well, then the brands are going to stop coming and the fulfillment providers are going to stop paying for the service.
Yeah.
And if fulfillment providers are on and paying for the service, but we keep having really poor experiences with brands or like they're going to fall off and the whole
Mhm.
thing falls apart, right? So it's much more focused on relationships between the provider and the brand and making sure that they can facilitate that effectively and us providing the right marketplace for both sides to thrive,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Consultants are the other way for brands. We talked about that. But consultants are expensive, rightfully so. They're
Yeah.
highly experienced, right? They have connections. They've done this before. Their job is running RFPs, and there's a need and a place in the ecosystem for that. But not everybody needs that, right? For example, myself, I have a ton of experience going through the RFP process. I have a ton of experience on the brand side and the fulfillment provider side. If I was at a brand right now, I would probably not need, my resource constraint wouldn't be expertise. My resource constraint likely would be time. And so without an option like Slotted, I'm likely going to work with a consultant, and I'm going to overpay to help me be more efficient. This helps to solve for that. Or on the flip side, you're a brand new startup, your cash flow is tight. Consultants can be expensive to do that. This helps bring those tools that you would get from a consultant, that expertise you would get from a consultant without that overhead, right? Your overhead is a refundable deposit, but it's a reasonable amount, especially for brands that are startups and smaller. So yes, you're going to part from that cash flow for a period of time, but you know, it's the equivalent of grabbing a latte at Starbucks every day on your way to work for a month, right? Like it's not overly hindering for a brand. And then we also bring a broader network because we are an open platform and it is free to be on. So while we are curating relationships with almost everybody that's signing up from a fulfillment provider perspective, you're not at the mercy of the people we have relationships with, right? So you get a broader search, and then you're in charge where the consultant is really leading it for you. And if the consultant's really great at what they do, typically, then they're going to give you a lot of analysis and a lot of feedback and walk you through exactly why they chose everything. But you're only in charge of the decision at that point. You're not necessarily in charge of how it's being done and how it's going about. And there are people that may want that, or there's businesses that need that, for some example. So that's where we can support there. Right? Yeah. And then from the provider side, I danced around a little bit. The biggest difference from us versus your traditional, or what you would think about as a matchmaker, is our cost structure is different. Right. So we've set it up to be a freemium model, right? Free to be on, free to list, free to be found. If you want to be eligible to be invited to RFPs and to be brought into that shortlist for people, there's a monthly fee. It's a monthly subscription. It's $180 a month for a fulfillment provider to be on and be listed, because we see this as a marketing avenue for them. It's a way that you're getting found and a way you're getting searched. And so if you're on there and you're active, you're going to get found and you're going to be able to be into those RFPs. And then we also don't have an ongoing percent of revenue. Instead, we have an award fee, which is a one-time fee if you win the business, and it's invoiced after revenue generating activity starts, right? I don't want to give away the secret sauce, right, about how we've set that up. Feedback that we've gotten is it's highly competitive. It may not work for everyone as we talk through it, depending on what that fulfillment provider is prioritizing. But generally, when you look at the ROI on it for your average size brand, all in for a year between your subscription and your RFP, most people are looking at a one-time cost or at a cost for the year of being less than 3.5%. Most people are seeing under 2% if the deals are larger, paid to Slotted, right? And we're not coming back because that's not happening in perpetuity. So you're now incentivized. When we talked about aligning incentives again now, right? Yeah. You're incentivized to grow that business, right? If that business was supposed to be $1 million in year one, and we charged based off of that, and that business turns into $1.5 million, well, I'm not coming back for any of that $500,000 of upside. That upside's all year. Right. And so we put ourselves in a position where people can get in the right relationships, not be concerned about if economics changed, if we made bad assumptions, if things are developed differently, what does that look like? How does that hurt us? How does that not hurt us? You can plan for the costs, and you know what those costs are before you even submit your proposal. So I don't want to say there's transparency because we're not showing rates to people ahead of time. We're not showing what fees the providers playing, but I would say we're neutral, and then we're very open with providers, right? So before a provider submits, it says, hey, this is the deal that you're putting forward. If you were to win, this is what that cost would be, right? And we're going to charge that after the brand has confirmed they've moved in, and we'll do it on a net term so that you're generating revenue before we come for it. And then that's the last time you'll hear from us on that deal specifically, right? So you can plan for it effectively.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you guys have thought through this like very well. And I think it probably comes from a lot of experience of, your experience being involved in this, and then, Isba's experience as well, and being involved in his processes, and putting that all together and kind of, making this tool that's thought about all these different aspects of it. And like you said, being very, very kind of hands off, right? And really just being a tool in a sense that's put together all this expertise and knowledge of this situation in particular, on both sides of the table, and bringing that together to really be able to facilitate the right way to go about this. And I think that it's very interesting to see that, and really appreciate you coming on and sharing about this, and talking about some of these challenges too as well, for people that may be going through them at the moment, or have lived through them in the past, or might be going through them in the future as well. So if people are interested in learning more about Slotted, they want to get their company up on there, or their brand, they want to utilize this tool, what's the best way to learn more, or go to the website and do it themselves?
Yeah, the best way to learn more is to go to www.slotted.com. From there, you'll be able to see any of the information that I just talked about. You'll be able to see how our structure is set up. You'll be able to get into the application itself to poke around and see what it looks like. You get a limited version of it without an account, but it's very easy to then create an account, sign up, get in. Like I said, there's no cost to creating the account. Right? There's no cost to be on there, to be searched either as a brand or as a fulfillment provider. But if you want that ability to be into the RFP, then create the account. Typically, if you have 1 to 3 locations and you have your information available, it takes about 45 minutes to get totally set up with your account looking good,
Yeah.
right? It can take less than that if you just want to do the bare minimum, but yeah, and then from there, there's a lot of information, different ways to contact us. I'm super active on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn directly and DM me there. You can email us at contact@slotted.com. There's lots of different ways to get in touch with us. I love talking with all the providers that are out there. If you're a provider that's signed up already and I haven't gotten to you yet, I'm working my way through it, but I'm making sure that we're getting in touch with everyone so that we can answer any questions that people have, and talk about it, because like you mentioned, it is different than what's out there right now. At the core, it's very similar. It's based off a database of fulfillment providers, but really we're providing a really strong service for the 3PLs, and we're providing a really streamlined tool for the brands to be able to run their RFP. And we want to make sure that we're keeping in mind who our customers are, and it's both sides of that equation, right? And so we want to make sure that we're making a good experience for everyone, but especially for the fulfillment providers who are leveraging our services.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great thing. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com, as well as in the show notes, so people can easily find it. And I will attest to Joe's activity on LinkedIn. So you can definitely connect with him and get in touch with him there as well. So Joe, appreciate you coming on the show and telling us all about this new exciting tool for our industry called Slotted.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.